Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on NetApp Keystone Storage as a Service, brought to you by Insight Cloud and Data Center Transformation Division. I'm Christy Satchery, Marketing Manager at Insight, and will be your moderator today. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be an interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you're looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. All questions from this webcast will be captured. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical issues. I would now like to turn over this presentation to our presenter, Kent Christensen. Kent, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Christy, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kent Christensen. I'm a practice director at Cloud and Data Center Transformation at Insight. As Christy mentioned, it's intended to be interactive, so I know that's difficult when you're on mute. So anytime you have a question, just jump in with the question, and Christy will do her best to get in. So this is hopefully educational. We're excited about Keystone Storage as a Service. It's been a big topic lately, and so hopefully everybody gets something worthwhile out of it. Just quickly, Insight's changing every day. If you knew Insight from 5 years ago, you would have thought of them a lot of supply chain, software, et cetera. That still exists. It's still probably the biggest percentage of Insight's business, but it now includes specialization areas like connected workforce for all devices, endpoints, things like that. We're going to speak from the Center of Cloud and Data Center Transformation, which is cloud and data center and transformation. And it's really about the infrastructure, and storage as a service fits right in there. Digital innovation, really cool stuff, AOI, IoT, mobile device apps. Think about that as we're talking to the person writing applications and helping them do that. And we all work together. So that's, a transforming organization. You'll probably hear a little bit about how we're going to make sure that these specializations are more available as possible to you, our clients. We're going to talk a little bit about Keystone, which is a NetApp offering in as a service. So as a service is a key phrase. It's really picking up steam in 2020. It was picking up steam before all the chaos happened early in 2020. And like a lot of things, it really accelerated once everybody said, wow, this is creating a lot of uncertainty. And so people have been hearing us talk about it at Insight for quite some time. We've actually got quite a few customers and 20 to 30 opportunities we're working on. And it was kind of publicly announced by NetApp in the last couple of months. So that's not unusual for us. We've been working with NetApp kind of whenever they kick out something very strategic. We're usually there when they're planning it, as opposed to waiting for them to announce it. So that goes back to, FlexPod, when they did CDOT, when they became Flash. And in each one of these cases, we were the first on their cloud strategy, first with their NVIDIA AI strategy. And so it's not uncommon that we're saying, okay, this makes a lot of sense. We're going to invest early. And on the other side of it, they're working with us. And this Keystone solution is no different. We've been working on them with NetApp very closely. You can see videos on their website of what we're doing, and I'll show you a link to a video with them talking with us about it. But we've been working on this for about a year now, so it's not like we just thought of this yesterday. Cloud and Data Center Transformation does a lot of things. We sell more than NetApp. NetApp has some great storage and data management solutions that go across data center and cloud, and now offered as a service. But NetApp sometimes can benefit from data management software, or compute, or networking, or security, or combine it with cloud. And that's what we do. We take the key awesome technology, which hopefully in the next few minutes you'll say, wow, this is really interesting. How am I trying to use it? What am I doing for ransomware data management? How does this fit into my cloud strategy? What's my security profile around that? So we're prepared to answer all of those But for now, let's drill into what's happening in as a service. So this is a bunch of data. You don't need to read it. Christy said she will send you the slides. Really, there was a couple of interesting statistics. We've talked about this a little bit over the last few years, and Gartner really summed up how that went when they said in December or November of last year, so over a year ago, they said, this market for pay for what you use, consumption model, cloud consumption, there's different terms for it. It's been less than 1% of how people procure data center. But we predict in 2019, late 2019, that it will be 15% or more over the next 12 to 18 months because people are really starting to understand, I'd really like to just pay for what I use, kind of how cloud works. Clearly, by the time they got into the April-May timeframe and saw all the changes happening, they said that number could double. IDC has a lot bigger numbers that are approaching 40 to 50% of you, the consumer, wants to procure infrastructure that way. So this is just a way of saying that this picked up fast and is accelerating as we get into 2020, 2021 as something people are interested in. So it's a great opportunity to say, because we've been working with NetApp and others on this, let's talk about what we see, and it's up to you to determine if it fits your business model. So first of all, quickly, what is it? And I like to level set it with all the different ways you can consume infrastructure. So today, a lot of you have probably leveraged CapEx. And CapEx, once leases fell out of favor due to FASB, a lot of organizations said, we're CapEx. And that makes total sense. It kind of requires you to know what you need. If I'm going to buy something, whether it's a storage device or a car, I probably have to know how I'm going to use that over some longer period of time than just a few hours, days, weeks, to get the value out of it. And it's kind of up to me to take care of it and feed it, et cetera. So it can be an efficient way to buy a car or a storage device if you know how you're going to use it over a longer period of time. Cloud consumption, on the other hand, on the far right, and NetApp's been doing cloud consumption for years. And if anybody's interested in multitasking, you can Google cloud volumes on AWS, cloud volumes on Google, cloud Azure NetApp files on Azure, and you can see that they have offerings out there, cloud volumes, cloud ONTAP, et cetera. They're there, and you see the price. And what's really appealing about that is you don't have to plan for 4 years to buy something in the cloud. You probably can figure out fairly quickly that with a couple of clicks, I could have something provisioned. I didn't have to plan for 3 or 4 years. I have a lot of flexibility to start and stop it, go up and down. And these are things that didn't really happen in the CapEx world. So really, as a service, it's filling in that gap. And NetApp saying, hey, I've got these cloud services, but they're not available to somebody buying things in the data center. What if I brought cloud consumption to the data center? And that's kind of where as a service is fitting in there. So why would somebody want that? I think early on in early to midsummer, a lot of organizations were saying, I need to conserve capital. And because of that, they could use this just as a financial tool to say, look, if I don't want to pay now, can I conserve capital? And this actually does that because it's not going to be defined as a lease. So it doesn't go in your books as a liability, and there's a lot of benefits to that, just like cloud. And then there's the other side of it is, how do I want to do upright pricing? How do I want to pay for just what I use versus, hold flat, plan well? Can I scale up and down? So those are all really interesting attributes of as a service. So then you say, well, at what point when somebody say this really adds value? And there's two ways that organizations have a lot of uncertainty today. One of them is, I've got a cloud strategy. And anybody maybe listening probably knows a little bit about data and storage and cloud and realize that's not easy. But if the guys upstairs said, we're going to move X% of our workloads to the cloud in Y amount of time, you may know it's difficult, but they're not listening. So there's a cloud strategy, and we may have differing views about how much is going to get to the cloud over what period of time. And so what as a service does is it gives you a bridge to a cloud strategy. We have lots of customers, and we gave you an example today. They're saying, look, I'm going to put it on Keystone right now, and at some time, whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it may end up in the cloud, and this is the perfect landing place. So therefore, I took the risk out of managing to my cloud strategy, and we're on board with the cloud strategy by not saying, oh, we have to buy a CapEx thing for 4 years, which, doesn't have that flexibility. And the other one is, I think, obvious to a lot of people today. Who can plan 3 or 4 years out today with a level of uncertainty? I think we're all questioning how our schools are going to operate, our colleges are going to operate, government agencies, large organizations, including Insight. We can think we know how the economy is going to bounce back, but we don't know. And so this gives you a lot of flexibility. And at the end of the day, it takes a lot of risk out of difficult decision of what do I need to run my business, which is really the key there. So I think what you're going to see is if you start looking for as-a-service consumption models, you're going to see that everybody in the industry is getting the memo. So there's really not a major player that either hasn't announced or will announce some sort of an as-a-service strategy. And ironically, and I think hopefully by the end of this presentation you'll see why, they're all calling us, because not everybody knows how to deliver as a service. A lot of NetApp partners, for example, know how to sell a piece of storage, but a far smaller percentage of them know how to deliver it as a service. And so because, again, hopefully we demonstrate by the end of this, you see that, well, you guys certainly get how to deliver things as a service. All of them are calling us. And it's not like we're new to this because we've got a significant Azure business. Azure cloud services provided by us is a service. Google, AWS, Keystone, these are all examples. So when we look at, let's say there's 10 companies coming and saying, I've got a service-based pricing, we actually fairly quickly configure it into 2 buckets. One bucket is it a service? And if it's a service, do you price it based on a service? Now, if you did go and do your homework and Googled Azure NetApp Files, you probably saw how much it costs for the service. So you said, oh, how much is premium service of this thing? And the price is right there. And I'm going to show you in a minute how much Keystone is. And if you've bought storage before, you're probably not used to that because the other side is configuration-based pricing. So there are people saying, I have as a service, but I'm not going to tell you the price until I configure something for you. Then I'm going to go do some financial modeling about it, and you can kind of see some of the names like HP, Dell. We have a program called Private Infrastructure as a Service that says, if I configure something, I can give you a monthly price, but as a service is giving the pricing up front. I don't know how many people remember, or maybe you're not old enough to have bought a car and had to go in, and the pricing wasn't clear back in the day. And you sat there and you were nervous about how much is the car going to cost, and the person selling it to you said, well, I can't actually tell you how much the car costs. I need to go talk to the man behind the curtain, because the man behind the curtain is going to decide what mood he's in today, and I'm going to come back and say, oh, he's in a really good mood, here's the price. That's kind of how CapEx technology is being sold today. If I was going to sell you NetApp infrastructure, we would have to go to the NetApp salesperson, and if you really wanted a good price, his boss, and then we could come back and tell you the price. And as a service offerings that are service-based, we will tell you the price, and you can decide whether you want to call us or not. And kind of the internet ruined that game for car dealers, where everybody knows the price, and I'm not going to even come to you if you don't have a fair price. I think as a service is transitioned there, where you know the price, and you won't even call us unless you understand that that's a price I'm really interested in pursuing, and this seems to be something that my organization can get value from. So we don't want to go into all the technology NetApp has. You're listening, you may probably be familiar with them. They have this concept called the data fabric, and it's been termed a marketing term in ways, but this data fabric thing has been out for a while. And really it means that I didn't have to buy a bunch of products to have services that run in a data center. So maybe some of you have NetApp storage in your data center. Or in the cloud. And again, your homework was to Google, cloud volumes or Azure NetApp Files and say, oh my gosh, I can buy this from a cloud provider as well. and the fact that they are related to each other and can talk to each other. And if I didn't want to put my data in the cloud, I could actually put it in, say, an Equinix data center, next to the cloud. And there's interoperability. They're really the only organization that manages data across, private, hybrid, and public cloud with a single, not a bunch of products kind of glued together. So that's kind of the concept of the data fabric. And of course, you can see that they've had cloud services. So once you do that, you say, well, what is Keystone? Well, what I think happened was we said, well, how do we bring that buying consumption model that is so easy in cloud and so flexible to the data center? And that's really what Keystone did. It bought the on-premise consumption, so the data will actually sit in your data center on Keystone, but you're getting a cloud consumption model. And of course, if you say, well, can I move some of it to the cloud? Again, if you buy the data fabric, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty straightforward. And so it's really bringing the cloud consumption to the data that's not in the cloud, but in the data center. So that's an example. Again, for those of you that did go and Google it, you probably saw on Google, Cloud Volumes has these tiers of service: standard, premium, extreme, good, better, best. And on Azure NetApp Files, standard, premium, they called it ultra instead of extreme. AWS, same thing. And you'll see in Keystone, there are tiers: standard, premium, extreme. And if you start looking at the math, you say, wow, these are exactly the same. I can compare a gigabyte or a terabyte of premium on premise to the price in the cloud. Again, that was incredibly difficult to do, even last year. And now we're given the ability to go and say, well, how much is it on-prem? How much is it in the cloud? And this is kind of where the rate card is going. And again, if you start doing the math, you start to realize it's actually less expensive on premises. So if I needed X amount of premium, which is considered like an all-flash storage tier, and I wanted it to be in my data center, and it was, $925 for a terabyte for a year. You can break that down into gigabytes per month or whatever to compare. You'll realize that sometimes this is half the price of what it is in the cloud. And so that doesn't seem intuitive because, of course, in the cloud, there's a bunch of infrastructure. Like everything in the cloud, it's going to run on somebody else's computer. And you can imagine all the cloud providers have NetApp arrays there providing this premium level of service, and they're providing it to many. And if you think about Keystone, you're going to say, I need this level of service in my data center, and we're going to have to ultimately give you the infrastructure to provide that service. So it's not like it's going to run on vapor. It will run on premium NetApp infrastructure. It will be in your data center and will be only used by you. So somebody would say, well, that's probably more expensive in cloud, and instead it isn't. So this is transparent pricing. The other thing this is doing, and in the next one, is showing you all the capabilities. So, the extreme level of performance, which could be file or block, SIFT, NFS, iSCSI, fiber channel. That's kind of what NetApp has always done. That is for the highest performance workloads. Premium is kind of think about an all-flash array, can do premium. But some people that might have an all-flash array don't also have a hybrid, where I mixed flash and lower cost storage. And if you look on the last rate card, you realize that, hey, if I do have, and this is very typical in the many clients we have, I might like all of this flash, but when I realize that standard is 1/3 of the price of flash, whether it's on cloud or on Keystone, et cetera, then maybe I want to consider which workloads aren't needing high performance all the time. And it's very typical that 45 or 50% of the workloads don't always need this. And so you can have that tiering, and it really makes sense to do that and understand that. Object is for your large object stores, and if you have specific workloads. And then there's things in between. Premium data tiering is really that concept that as data comes in, it's hot, but after some period of time, I can tier it off into a lower object type of storage. So that's all built in. So all of these are there. All these capabilities, these are the standard. There's a lot of other capabilities in there, but you can see the breadth of the offering and the upfront pricing. And so those are a lot of the things that are really, really appealing about the Keystone solution. So with this in mind, as we walk into a client, he says, I have 327 terabytes of data. Like, great. Do you want all premium? Sure. He's like, do you think some of your workloads are standard? Well, I think, and so the concept of I think probably works in a lot of cases, but hey, would you be able to measure that? How much do I need for standard or premium or extreme? And the answer is yes, we can measure that. And there's a number of ways. One, NetApp has called a service design workshop, and we can do that. It is a NetApp technology called OCI. They come in, they run a service design workshop. It gets the data profiles of how the data is being used by all the applications. And you get this pretty graph that says 47% is using standard, 41% is using premium, and 9% has extreme level of use. Then we can sit down with you and say, does that map to your understanding, et cetera? A little bit broader is something that Insight has done for quite some time, and NetApp is actually funding it. We do what's called a cloud data management assessment. Does the same thing. What are my workloads? Who's using them? But adds a couple other variables. If I wanted to think about moving into the cloud, which ones fit that profile pretty well? And so kind of the same thing. I'm looking at my infrastructure and understanding how it's using. I'm looking at my applications, how they use the infrastructure. Both of them are typically no cost to you, the client. Both of them are fairly easy and non-invasive, so the security guys, okay, yep, that's okay to do that because we're just watching things, not getting in the middle of things, et cetera. And they give you a lot of understanding of how the infrastructure is being used. The third case is when somebody says, but I intend to move some of the workloads, whether that's to the cloud or to another data center. Now I'm taking a workload, i.e. an application, and I want to take it somewhere else, which means I'm going to probably change its network. If I change its network, whether I move it into the cloud network or my other data center network, I better understand who he's talking to. So the example of a SQL server, I'm going to move this SQL server, but oh, by the way, 4 applications use the SQL server if I move the SQL server without the application. So a workload transformation assessment does not only looks at the infrastructure, but the applications and does what we call a dependency map that says this application talks to these 10. This application over here doesn't appear to be talking to anybody. And it gives you a broader visibility. It's more strategic, more complex, but it also fits under this funding program where NetApp's funding of us doing the assessment. And this is a joint assessment where we combine the STW with what we call our SnapTard workload alignment. It can be partially funded at least through some of the NetApp funding. So some ideas how we can give you better visibility to what's going on in your data center and allow you to make clearer decisions. So let's go quickly with a couple examples. This one's a financial organization, which isn't the important part. The important part is this is a company that had made a major commitment to the cloud. In their case, it was Google. And, once the organization makes a major commitment to cloud, and maybe yours has, then they say, and everybody in the organization, this means we're not buying CapEx things that we need to amortize over 4 or 5 years. So that memo came down that says, you know what, I know it. I've been buying NetApp for a long time. I have no problem with NetApp, but I can't buy it like that. I need a different strategy. And so they're kind of trying to figure this out. And we said, well, what about Keystone? Keystone, you can put it on here as little as a year. You can move the license from the on-premises version to the cloud version. And that was so popular, they actually like, oh my gosh, can you do this for everything? And so in this case, NetApp was doing the file and somebody else was doing the block. And it was, what this financial organization said, these are our tier 0 workloads. And we had this other vendor kind of doing tier 0 because it's block. And we didn't think NetApp did that. And maybe 5 years ago, people didn't know that. And so what happened, fast forward, is as we started solving their problem, I'm going to move this data center. I'm going to close this data center. Oh, I realize I can't get these workloads to the cloud, so I need to move them somewhere. Where am I doing them? They're putting them on Keystone, and what's coming along with it is all the block workloads. So all of a sudden, this biases that says, well, NetApp can't do block, but that guy can't do cloud services and doesn't have any strategy for that. So we're doing all of that. So that is an organization that is basically all in on the Keystone strategy moving forward. The other is a federal agency. I've been on, I guess it's the end of the year, the feds are putting out bids, et cetera. But one of the early ones, and actually it was one of our first Keystone customers, we're seeing a lot of federal agencies, governments, things like that, saying, look, I got this concept. I just want to pay for what I use. Now, this organization had no intention of doing anything for cloud, and what they were looking at is their alternative to, I've got this NetApp that's doing these things, blah, 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 and I could refresh it because I need new technology. I need to get everything on all flash, but it didn't fit this year's budget. So what are my options? And we said, well, does Keystone fit? And so they quickly did the analysis, and we would be happy to do this with anybody that says, well, let's just pretend, fake numbers, but let's just pretend, hey, I could sell you new technology for, let's say, $3 million. And you can do 300,000 if that's more appropriate. And you say, okay, and that would probably last me 4 years, et cetera. Or you could say, but Keystone might be $100,000 a month or $87,000 a month. And they say, well, if I used it for 4 years, it would be a little bit more expensive in their case, right? Yours may be different. But at the end of the day, they didn't even start a new sentence. But this is perfect because this aligns to my budget this year, and it aligns to my budget next, whether it goes up or down. And so they adopted it. What's impressive about this, anybody who's ever dealt with the federal government in any way, shape, or form, or state government, is they had to go through a public RFQ process, which everybody gets to bid on. And we actually were awarded that within 5 weeks of them positioning it. So we met their requirements so clearly, and nobody else really came in and said, well, I can give you what you want. And so now I don't know if I have a logo shot on here, but if you saw all the organizations, there's probably about a dozen state and federal agencies already saying this is how I want to move forward. The third one is an example of a refresh. We have a lot of clients, maybe you're one of them, that says, well, I have NetApp technology, and somewhere along the line, it's been here for X amount of time. Maybe it's 3 or 4 years. And somebody's going to say, should I refresh, i.e. buy new stuff? In the CapEx world, that was the decision. I could either buy new stuff or I could extend my support so I could get another year out of the old stuff. And so that was kind of the binary decision that was made. And now enter Keystone. Well, if buying more stuff in this example would have been $1.2 million, and if extending the support on your old stuff, which was spread in too many data centers, didn't meet the objective of the new stuff, but it was cheaper at $500,000, what if it was $300,000 a year for Keystone? Well, no-brainer. I want to get the new stuff at a fraction of the price of renewing my support or having to buy all the new stuff because, again, the cloud was in their future, and so they didn't want to make a long-term commitment. This gave them the flexibility. So 3 types of examples of different thoughts of I need to consume infrastructure. Do I have different options? And hopefully this is helping you understand that there are certainly some different options available. The second part is if you go to the cloud, you really don't touch the infrastructure. And some people might say, I like that. I don't even want to touch it. But most, we find, actually want to run the NetApp or infrastructure the way they did. They want to be able to run a report. They may want to be able to see what it's doing. They want to be able to go touch it. They want to be able to provision it when somebody asks for storage. And so on the one model, we say that's all great. We're there to set it all up. We're going to take care of any firmware upgrades or any of that, so you don't have to kind of care for it, but you can operate it the way you're used to. And then if you have any questions, whether it's your bill or how it's working with your VDI environment, et cetera, we'll provide all the support. And then you can add services that says, well, maybe I don't want to do this part. Maybe I don't want to do this part, all the way to I don't want to have anything to do with it. I want it just to be like cloud. I say go, I open a ticket, more comes, I press a button, I get more. And so that's what kind of the fully operated versus, you operate, we help, and then all the ingredients in between. So an example of that is when we provide you a Keystone as a service model, it always comes what we call essential services. So we're doing the billing, we're doing the monitoring, we're helping make sure that it's meeting your needs, not just is the storage working, but what are you doing with it, and is that helping? If you're tiering it to cloud, okay, if you like to evaluate your costs in cloud versus on-prem, et cetera, we'll help you with that. Is it working with your networking and security, et cetera? So that's what Client Success Manager does. And then always call us with any questions. And then you'll see that we can layer in services. So this is like a menu where you can kind of come in and say, I'd like you to do this as well. I'd like you to do this as well. And the incremental costs are really a fraction of the base service pricing you saw. And so really kind of starting to conclude, as we see this happening, Keystone is hopefully you're seeing an incredible value proposition as opposed to just only choices buy infrastructure or refresh my old stuff. Now all of a sudden I have this other option called Keystone. And all the logos that you see on here, we have relationships with. Because again, the cloud providers, Google, AWS, Azure, have had work relationships with us. We have relationships with the compute providers, HP, Dell. You're going to hear a lot about Cisco coming up that we can combine in. So, we can make a flex pod by combining Cisco and NetApp. How do I do data protection, or more popular today, what do I do with ransomware? What does my network look like? Do I need security? Or do I need to host it in an Equinix data center? So we can actually take Keystone, if it was $1 and if compute was 20 cents and cloud was, 35 cents, and combine those into one engagement for you. So that's, I think, where NetApp really understands that not only have we delivered Keystone to a point where, they really like what we're doing with them, and we work very closely with them, but we can add in other things that, they have technology relationships with, but we've had go-to-market relationships with, especially in as-a-service capabilities for a while. So I want to thank you for listening. As Christy mentioned, we will send you this. I think it makes sense, if you need this, to pass it around. There's an ebook that's kind of a quick, non-specific read of what's going on with this as-a-service thing. You can be entertained by just going to NetApp's site on Keystone, and you'll actually see the product manager, Samantha Rao, interviewing us, asking us questions about what we see in Keystone. Insight had their big partner and customer conference at the end of October. We did a presentation, and we invited Sunitha to be a part of that. And so that video is available if you want to see it. And it kind of covers a lot what we did. Obviously, the next step is to call somebody from Insight team and say, can you help me get more information? If for whatever reason you're not sure who that is, you can always send an email to insight@insight.com, and we will get you connected to the right people. And I think, kind of the last part is, as you kind of go through and plan, whether it's data center transformation, digital transformation, infrastructure refresh, am I going to refresh under the latest and greatest technology? If that makes sense, absolutely. Love to help do that. If I'm not ready to make a big commitment on a total refresh of stuff, does Keystone fit the bill, getting me onto the latest technology without making the longer-term commitment? We're finding more and more that makes sense. And if I'm sweating assets or trying to extend it on my existing strategy, at least let us come in and say, well, what if you just got new stuff and maybe that solves some of your problems in refresh, but it doesn't cost that more than extending support in your existing environment. So with that, I want to thank you. And then, Christy, is this a shy group, or do you think we have any questions?
It does not look like we have any questions at this time, but as Ken mentioned, please reach out to your Insight rep if you do have questions, and we'll be happy to handle those and get you the answers that you need. So thank you for attending today's webcast. And then an on-demand version of this webcast will be available within 2 to 3 days. You will receive an email notification once the recording is available. Thank you again for participating in today's webcast.